that's our name. Waterfowl hunting, that's our game. Wheels keep rolling down those interstates. We're getting close and we're waiting for daybreak. Decoys are placed as we plan. Our blinds are hidden on the land. When we start calling, the birds they know that call. And here they come, boys, get ready and watch them fall. 24/7, that's our name. Waterfowl hunting, that's our game. Wheels keep rolling down those interstates. We're getting close and we're waiting for daybreak. After the morning hunt is done, we pick up our gear and unload our guns. Leg and neck bands, there's enough to go around. We load 'em up and we head back into town. 24/7, that's our name. Waterfowl hunting, that's our game. Wheels keep rolling down those interstates. We're getting close and we're waiting for daybreak. Wheels keep rolling down those interstates. We're getting close and we're waiting for daybreak.
The first thing we want to talk about is how to properly hold the duck call. We feel that a lot of people actually overlook this step because they're more concerned with either their air presentation or their mouth mechanics, and they're not really paying attention to whether they're holding the call correctly or incorrectly. The first thing you need to do is determine whether you're right or left hand dominant, and then decide which hand you're actually going to hold the call with. What we want to do is we want to place the end piece of the call right there in the webbing between the thumb and the pointer finger. Because what we're going to do is we're actually just going to roll these fingers over, because these fingers here are going to what's going to control the back pressure of the call. And a couple things to remember is, one is you don't have to put a death grip on this call. You don't have to grip this call like you're afraid somebody's going to take it away from you. You actually just want a very loose grip, because you're not just holding the call with your hand, but we're actually, when we push the call up against our mouth, we're bracing the call between our mouth and our hands. So you can just keep a loose grip on the call. Another thing to remember is you don't want to choke way down on the call, and you don't want to choke too far up on the call. You just want a really good, comfortable grip between the thumb and pointer finger. And one of the main things you don't want to do is don't use two hands, okay? You don't want to lay this hand over to try to make different sounds. We're going to get all the sounds we want out of these fingers right here. So let's take a look at some footage of guys blowing duck calls. Now that we're holding the duck call properly, let's talk about how to properly place the duck call to our mouth. What we're going to do is we're going to take our bottom lip and we're going to wrap it underneath the bottom rim of the call. Our top lip is going to cut off the top third of the call. The way to think about this would be as if you're going to drink from a bottle of water. It's the same concept. You want to place your mouth on the bottle so that you do not lose any water out of the side of your mouth. When you blow a duck call, you don't want any air escaping out of the side of your mouth either. So remember, the bottom lip wraps underneath the rim of the call, and the top lip cuts off the top third. When we were talking about holding the call, we were talking about how we actually push the call against our mouth. Well, in order to keep us from pushing our lips against our teeth, we want to counter push the call with our lips. The way we're going to do this is basically pucker up like you're going to kiss somebody. But make sure when you do this that you keep a consistent seal around the call so you don't lose any air. And that is how you properly place the call to your mouth. What we're going to do now is let's talk about proper tongue placement. What we want to do is we're going to take the tip of our tongue and we're going to place it behind the back part of our bottom teeth, right where our gum line and teeth meet. The reason for this is because we want to keep the tip of our tongue out of the way. All of our tongue work and tongue manipulation is going to be done with the back part of our tongue and the middle part of the tongue. The part of the tongue I'm talking about is if you're to take a piece of candy and place it right there on the back part of the tongue. That's the part that we're going to be basically using to cut off the air and to manipulate the air. One thing to keep in mind is that words are good for tongue reference, okay? A lot of times you'll get a call package that might have, it'll give you reference words to say into the call. You cannot say a word into the call and expect the call to operate. You have to be able to take that word or that tongue movement and match it with air presentation, okay? So, but as far as tongue placement, the biggest thing to remember is that we're going to keep the tip of the tongue down and we're going to do all the work with the back part of the tongue. At this point, let's talk about presenting the first breath into the call. We've actually got two types of air that we can use. We've got cold air and we have warm air. An example of cold air would be if you're trying to blow out the candles on a birthday cake. Take a deep breath, puff your cheeks, and blow into your hand like you're going to blow out a candle. If you feel that air is very cool to the touch. Now, warm air is the other type of air. Warm air would be an example is if you're trying to fog a pair of glasses. So take a deep breath and blow into your hand like you're trying to fog a piece of glass. If you feel that air is very warm to the touch. Warm air is the air that we're going to want to use. Warm air is actually coming out of our diaphragm, and we're going to have better control over our warm air than our cold air. And you can actually tell that difference into the call. You can hear it and you can feel it. Let's put some cold air into the call. Let's just basically place the call to our mouth and take a deep breath and even puff your cheeks like you're trying to blow out a candle and just blow lightly into the call. Sounds like a toy. Now when we take that air and we turn it into warm air, we're going to hear a distinct difference. So listen to this. You hear how there's a little bit more constriction on the air? So practice putting warm air into your call until you're comfortable presenting that air. And we're getting ready to move on to the next step.
Huh?
Awning.
Hey, look good, Greg. On the water. I think we're off on a setup just a hair.
Now that we're comfortable putting warm air into the call, let's talk about the tongue movement required to manipulate that warm air to make a quack. Now, we said that you cannot say a word into the call, but we're going to use a word for reference. Think of the word rick, R-I-C-K, and say this word over to yourself several times over. Rick, rick, rick. The most important thing about the word rick is the R and the K. The R represents the starting point of the tongue, and the K represents the ending point of the tongue. The K sound is the part where the tongue is actually going to touch the roof of your mouth to cut off the air. Rick, rick, rick. You feel that tongue movement that it takes to go from R to K. Rick. Practice this over and over because this is very, very important because eventually we're going to take away the word and we're just going to use the tongue movement. Rick, rick. So let's stop saying the word rick and let's just add it to warm air presentation. Do this several times over. Okay? Now what I want you to do is let's take the call, and we're actually going to blow into the call backwards. This may not make much sense, but blowing into the call backwards is actually a great way to practice mechanics, because we can blow into the back of this call as much as we want and it's not going to make a sound, which is good because all we're concentrating on is our mouth mechanics and our air presentation. And then once we have that down to a T, then we'll turn the call around and we'll blow it into the call. Now let's start off blowing into the back end of the call, basically taking away the word Rick and adding just the air presentation. As you're putting that air presentation into the back end of the call, you should feel the air change from the R to the K. It starts off at the R very relaxed, and then in the K it's more constricted. That is what's going to actually make the note very realistic and full sounding. Okay, now that we've done that, let's go ahead and turn the call around and let's go ahead and present that air presentation into the call. Remember, we're using warm air, the tip of our tongue is anchored down, and we're using the Rick tongue movement, but basically just putting the presentation into the call with just air. All we're looking for is single quacks. Now, if for some reason you're getting a sound that's not pleasing to you or doesn't sound like a hen, what you want to do is go ahead and turn the call back around and pay attention to your mechanics. It's very, very important that you spend a lot of time on this because you want your quacks to be as perfect as possible, because the quack is the base sound for all these other sounds we're getting ready to learn. So practice that over and over and over until you have the perfect quack.
Nicely done.
At this point, you should be pretty consistent on your quacks. And what we're getting ready to do now is we're going to talk about how to add back pressure to sweeten the note up. But before you move on to this next step, it is very, very important to make sure that you are very consistent on your quacks. They need to be the exact same way every single time. Because if you're not consistent and you try to move on, you're going to start to have trouble and you're going to get frustrated. So make sure your quacks are consistent, but let's go ahead and start talking about basically adding back pressure. Without the back pressure, we basically had a monotone quack. It sounded good, but we can sweeten it up just a little bit more. What we had before was something like this. Which sounds good because we're getting the variation. We have some variation with our tongue because we're starting off with the R and ending at the K. But what we want to do now is we're going to add these fingers right here to basically make the note a little fuller. We're going to keep our fingers closed on the first part of the note, and then we're going to open them up on more towards the end of the note, and it's going to give us a fuller sound like this. It's a timing thing too. It's very, very important to make sure your timing is right, because as you progress, you're going to use that hand movement on basically all your sounds, even your quick comeback calls. So you want to make sure that your back pressure and your fingers are consistent and on time on the slow quacks before we try to move on to the faster quacks. But let's practice this a few more times. You hear the difference between and. You'll really hear the difference when we start speeding it up a little bit. But practice that over and over, adding the back pressure to make those notes sweet.
That's the sound we're trying to make right there. The sound calling me and Drake's to their death, their final landing.
Think it's gonna be a miss?
Huh?
Think it'll be a miss?
How close was that one, Drake?
About 8 yards. I don't know how he didn't see me. Of course, this camera looked pretty good. At this point in the game, you should be a quacking machine. What we want to do now is let's take those quacks and actually turn them into a sequence. The first sequence we're going to talk about is a 3 to 7 note greeting call. When you build sequences, all you're really doing is you're taking quacks and either lengthening them or shortening them. Okay? It's not real complicated. And the way you practice this is let's start off with our quacks, and we're going to let's put 3 quacks in the same breath. For example, take a breath, do it again. Take a breath and do it again. Now what we want to do to build a sequence, we want to basically drag them out and then start to shorten them up. So let's drag out the first one, then make the second one shorter, and then the third one even just a little bit shorter. For example, all in the same breath. Do this over and over again. Okay? That's not real hard once you get the hang of it. And really, all these Mallard sounds, the greeting call, the comeback call, they're all going to be based on the same theory. It's just some are going to be more aggressive than others. So let's practice it a couple more times. Once you have 3 down, let's go ahead and extend it to 4. Getting just a little bit more excited with it. And the thing is don't worry about if you don't sound exactly like I do, because all Mallard hens, they all sound different. Older hens are going to be deeper, a little bit slower, and younger hens are going to be higher pitched and a little bit faster. So there's no right or wrong as long as your cadence sounds realistic and you have a realistic tone. So practice that over and over again for that 3 to 7 note greeting.
Big Al converts.
We should be consistent on that relaxed greeting. What we want to do now is let's talk about getting into a comeback call. Okay? It's basically the exact same thing, only it's going to be faster and more aggressive. Okay? So what we want to do is let's take that greeting call, 3 to 7 notes, somewhere in between, and let's pick up the speed and basically make it a little more aggressive. For example, they're going to be faster and shorter. Go from a greeting into a comeback. You can hear the difference. The greeting call is a very relaxed sound. It's basically, it's a content sound. The comeback call, that is the sound we're going to use when ducks are either turning or going away from us and we want to change the flight path they're taking. A good way to practice that is go from your greeting call right into your comeback call, because the biggest thing is you want to make sure that there is a distinguishable difference between the two. Because a greeting call is a sound that is a very relaxed, content sound, and then that aggressive comeback call is the sound that we're going to give when ducks are either turning away from us or we want them to take a different flight path than what they're already taking. So practice that greeting call and then follow right up with a comeback call. And don't worry about the number of notes in the cadence, because a comeback call might be, for example, a young excited hen might give 7 to 10 notes, very short and fast. Or she might give even 3 notes. Here's an example of a short comeback call. It's all about how you present it. Aggression is the key, not necessarily how many notes. So practice your greeting call and practice your comeback call and make sure there's a distinguishable difference.
That was awesome. I like that.
Before we move on to the next step, one thing I want to talk about is basically the most important part of duck calling, and that's knowing the sound that you want to achieve. And what I mean by that is before you're going to be successful at giving a greeting call, a comeback call, or a chatter, you need to have it imprinted in your mind what these sounds should sound like. And the only way to do that is to listen to live mallards in their natural environment. There's one of two ways you can do that. Either one, you can go to a park or a refuge or a marsh and listen to their live ducks in their natural environment, or two, we actually sell an audio CD called Mallards Gone Wild. What this is not an instructional CD, this is an audio CD of live mallards in their natural environment. The sounds you're hearing now are live digital recordings of mallards in their natural environment. These sounds are going to be divided into 4 separate tracks. In these tracks, you're going to hear feeding sounds, greeting sounds, comeback sounds, and what the CD offers you is it offers you the ability to listen to these sounds and study these ducks in their natural environment, whether you're at home, in your truck, or even if work allows, you can listen to them at work. But the point is you need to listen to these sounds, whether it be on a CD or actual live ducks in their natural environment. You need to listen to these sounds and have a full understanding of the cadence, the pitch of the way these ducks execute these sounds. Because you being a duck caller and not having a full understanding of the sound you want to achieve is much like a musician trying to play a song that he really doesn't know. Same thing. So before you actually start trying to learn these sounds and execute all these sounds in a duck call, it's very, very important to make sure you have it in your mind the way you want these sounds to come out. The sounds you just got done listening to are what we refer to as mallard chatter. A lot of people call this feeding chatter, but that's actually kind of a misconception because mallards, they will chatter when they fly, they will chatter when they feed, they will chatter even when they're just resting. Chatter is basically just general communication amongst ducks in a group. Okay, it's not just a feeding oriented sound. But let's talk about actually executing the chatter on a duck call. The best way to do this is start off with doing just single quacks. And then speed this up. And then speed it up as fast as you can. What you're going to notice that you're going to start doing is you're going to start chopping it up a little bit. They're going to get shorter and shorter, for example. And try to do that as fast as you can. Okay? Now, even though that may not sound like chatter, but we're getting there. But what you're doing is as you speed those quacks up, you're shortening them up and you're actually adding more air constriction on it. Okay? Let's do this one more time as fast as we can. Okay? That last couple seconds of sounds, that's the sounds we want to start working with. Now take those sounds and actually add more air constriction to them and shorten the movement of your tongue down a little bit. So we're trying to get them as short as possible. Okay, see how they shorten down a little bit? Let's do it even a little bit more. Okay, now what we want to do is the way we make that realistic is we want to start adding mallard rhythm, mallard cadence. Okay, ducks are not going to make that sound continuous like that. They're going to start, they're going to stop, and then what you're trying to do is you're trying to create the illusion of multiple ducks. So we're going to do that by playing with the back pressure on our hands. By lowering the back pressure and raising it up, we're going to get different sounds. So for example, let's start off just starting and stopping. Okay, sounds a little more realistic, but it's still not as sweet as what we'd like. Let's now add the back pressure. You can see by doing that, you can create the sounds of multiple ducks. So what you want to do is you want to practice basically trying to get as much variation as possible in your chatter. And then what we're getting ready to do is we're going to start creating some sound combinations by mixing in other sounds with our chatter. But practice making your chatter as realistic as possible. Before we bring this to a close, let's talk about the sounds that we've learned and how we would apply these sounds in hunting situations. These sounds are the single quack, the greeting call, the comeback call, and chatter. The single quack is a non-aggressive sound that we will actually give ducks to basically just test the waters. We will give this sound basically just trying to get a response out of a group of ducks before we give them anything else. And you would not believe how many times we've had ducks basically just drop out just on single quacks. So this is a great sound to start off on. For example, And then if we haven't gotten a response out of the ducks, then we'll move on to, say, a greeting call. A greeting call, we're stepping up the intensity just a little bit, but it's still not that aggressive of a call. And now what we're doing with a greeting call is we're trying to get a response out of these ducks. We're going to keep on stepping up the intensity until we get a response. So if the quacks don't work, let's try a greeting call. If you notice, it's not that aggressive. I mixed in quacks with it, basically just showing realism, okay? And like I said, we're still looking for a response. If that doesn't work, then what we're going to do is we're going to go into a comeback call. So remember, these ducks are not working this, they're basically passing by, but now it's to the point to where, okay, these ducks aren't going to respond to non-aggressive calling, let's step it up and get aggressive with them. So we'll actually go from the greeting call into the comeback call. And by stepping up that intensity, of course, as the ducks, if they continue to pass by, then we're going to basically get more and more aggressive with it, just trying to get a response. A lot of times, like I said, a lot of times you will get this response. The ducks will start working on either the quacks, the greeting call, or the comeback call.
Good bunch. Yeah. A couple wiggles. That was a total widgeon wipeout there.
All right, right there was a series of some aggressive comeback calls. And hopefully the ducks will turn on that, because that's pretty much the last thing in our bag of tricks that we can use to turn ducks. Now you may be asking, well, where's the chatter come into play? There's a lot of different opinions on the use of the chatter. We feel that the chatter is actually going to be the least effective call for trying to turn ducks. Now the chatter is a good sound that you can give when you have ducks working. What it is it's a non-aggressive sound that basically just demonstrates general communication. For example, when ducks are working, this would be about as much chatter as we would give. And that's actually quite a bit of chatter, because all we're trying to do is we basically just want to give a little bit of sound to let these ducks know that there's some activity, and we're waiting for those ducks to circle to reach that point to where they're either going to come in or they're going to reach that point when they're working where we're going to hit them with a quick comeback call, basically to turn them back around. For example, it would sound something like this. And when you hit them with something with a little quick comeback call like that, that's normally when you can get them to turn immediately and then make hopefully their final approach. But let's listen to some guys calling ducks using all those different sounds. From myself and everyone at Zinc Calls, we want to thank you again for choosing our products. And we truly hope that the Power Duck Pack has been beneficial to getting you started on the right track to successful duck calling. And please, if you have any questions at all, feel free to give us a call at the shop at 1-877-LEG-BAND, or you can check us out on the web at www.zincalls.com. And look for more Waterfowl University products in the future. And until then, good luck and happy hunting.
Bullet. Love to shoot bullets. Get 'em, boys. I think that was a 410 gadwall right there.